Hi everyone, welcome back to the Climate of Sport Ask Me Anything podcast with me, Claire Poole. A pleasure to be back with you on this episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading the pod. It's amazing to see the increasing number of downloads on the pods every week. Hopefully that means it's resonating with you. You're getting something from it. And thank you for your questions. Keep them coming. Already now is a back catalogue to get through, but it's a great problem to have. And we might even do these episodes more frequently if the demand is there. So it's wonderful. Thank you. Keep them coming. What we're talking about is jobs in sport and sustainability. That's the topic of this week's episode. Jobs, training, recruitment. How to get them, who should be getting them, what expertise people should have, what's going to be best for scaling up the efforts in sustainability in sport. How are we going to continue the growth within sustainability in sport? So that's what we're going to be getting into for this episode. Loads to talk about. And actually, we're going to combine a couple of questions in different ways that we've had in around this same topic. So brilliant to be able to do that. First of all, let's just think about some statistics of the job market at the moment. So the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report in 2023 reported the fastest growing roles relative to their size today are driven by technology, digitalization and sustainability, which probably isn't going to be a great surprise to you. However, the report also noted that sustainability specialists are actually second from the top on their list of fastest growing jobs, showing how important this sector is to the entire job market, not just sports. They came second only to AI and machine learning specialists, which again, I'm sure isn't a massive leap for a lot of you, and sustainability specialists coming second, ranked above the likes of business intelligence, systems engineers, information security, and others that we would expect to see. So we know the sustainability roles are ramping up. We know they're scaling up. We know how important they are. With that in mind, of the importance of sustainability more broadly, let's think about how it intersects with sport. So we're going to get into our first question, which came in from Jamie by email. So Nyla, over to you on Jamie's question that we're going to cover off.
Jamie's question is, what are the benefits and drawbacks to a team or organization of hiring sustainability professionals into sustainability positions versus either training current staff in sustainability issues or hiring staff with a sustainability background into current roles?
Thanks, Nyla. So basically, what are the benefits and drawbacks to a team hiring specific expertise in a sustainability role versus training current staff or hiring those with some sustainability expertise into other roles? So I presume by that, Jamie's question is around people hiring into other roles, into other key functions, maybe marketing or communications or facilities, and trying to hire people who've got some sustainability expertise already, even if they're hiring into non-specific sustainability roles, if that makes sense. So I think it's a really great question. I think I'm going to tackle it from both sides first. So Jamie's asked us one versus the other. So we'll tackle both of those first, and then I'll share some thoughts on perhaps other approaches as well. So first of all, when I tend to speak to people about this question, and to be honest, it's come up a lot over the years, they tend to fall into two camps. So the first camp could be couched as it's absolutely crucial to hire a director of sustainability, a sustainability manager, someone who is entirely responsible for sustainability to lead. That's crucial. The counter view to that is, if you have a head of sustainability in post, it may abscond others of the responsibility around sustainability. And actually, sustainability intersects with every single job role, and it should be everyone's job to do this, in which case, shouldn't you be just training everyone in sustainability and not hiring in a head of sustainability or sustainability director into post? I hear that view about it being everyone's role, and I absolutely agree with that. I also agree that sustainability intersects with everyone's role in sport. So whether you're responsible for facilities and operations, communications, human resources, the legal department, the commercial department, or partnerships, if you sit at the C-suite or the board, everybody should have sustainability as part of that role. It manifests in very different ways, but it should form part of the agenda for all of those roles. But also, the reason I sit in the camp of there needing to be someone responsible for sustainability is because you need someone for the buck to stop with them. You need a rabble-rouser to set targets and to hold accountability for milestones being reached. You need someone to keep it on the agenda across all the different functions and check in with those functions that what they should be doing is actually happening. Generally nowadays, especially in sport, when we're talking more about this, you need a credible spokesperson who can represent the organisation and be a face to this movement, and someone that people connect with on it as well. So having someone who's responsible for sustainability enables that. And you also need someone to keep across best practices the industry evolves and have their finger on the pulse of changes. So, we're seeing mandatory licensing changes or standards coming in that affect a lot of sport organisations. We're seeing reporting being requested, etc. So whilst it is everyone's responsibility, if nobody sits at a head of sustainability to keep across that, you could very quickly, if it's not your primary responsibility, very quickly get out of touch with what should be happening as the industry evolves. So as well as that, we've seen the desire to have that leadership be seen in the way that sports setting objectives. So for example, the Premier League recently released its Premier League environmental sustainability commitment from clubs. And one of those commitments is for clubs to designate a senior employee to lead the club's environmental sustainability activities. So not going as far as saying you need to have a head of sustainability, which actually UEFA in 2023 made it mandatory for each of its member associations to appoint an FSR, a football social responsibility manager, into post. They did make that a requirement for their member association. So the Premier League hasn't gone as far as that in this example. They're saying a senior employee to lead the club's environmental sustainability activities, which is fine. Essentially, someone is designated to lead on that. So we are seeing that this is expected now. We're moving into a realm of that being an expectation in sport. So let's look at some of the pros and cons of the options that we've set out here. So first of all, hiring a sustainability professional into the organisation that leads on sustainability. That's option one. So if you can have an in-house expert on corporate social responsibility, environmental social governance, so CSR, ESG, or sustainability, then you're able to lead on this work technically without consultants. And as I mentioned, the book sort of stops with them in terms of you've got the expertise, you've been brought into the organisation, help us set a baseline, help us put a strategy in place, tell us what we need. You're the expert, we lean on you, which is great. Where I've been involved with recruitment or seeing from an external perspective who's responsible for certain roles. Sometimes people with the hard skills, as we would think about it, the technical skills around sustainability or governance, CSR, ESG, sometimes the people with the hard skills don't always have the soft skills that go with it, that to be honest is part of the role really that sport needs just now. So leading sustainability in sport to me is more than just being an analyst of information and data and creating a carbon footprint or an environmental impact, whilst that is obviously absolutely crucial. My experience of it is that as well as leading on the technical side, as I mentioned, you need someone who can keep it on the agenda. You need someone who's a peacekeeper. It really helps if you've got a commercial mindset because sport business is so focused on the financial side that if you understand that and you get it and you're a credible voice within that, you're going to probably go much further than you would if you are just looking at things from a technical or an analytical perspective. If you have an understanding of the sport landscape and how decision-making is made in sport and some of the intersecting agendas, that also is an incredibly useful soft skill in terms of the way a strategy moves forward in sport. So basically, you're a credible internal and external voice for this. You garner credibility internally, you connect with your peers on it, you help bring them on this journey from a place of credibility, but also maybe you're a spokesperson externally for how the work is progressing, which we're seeing the need for more and more. So loads of pros to that, but also things to think about. Option two is training current staff or hiring staff with a sustainability background into other roles. So first of all, I would say on the training side, ideally the training is now happening anyway, to be honest, with sport organisations. Training all staff to understand that sustainability is part of their role and how they can play their part in progress around sustainability is something that should be happening, and we are seeing more and more. So I'm not going to read out all the different sectors of sport again that this could intersect with, but for example, if you are in a communications role, it's helpful for you to receive training that says these are the basics of climate change. This is how sustainability intersects with sport. This is how it intersects with our sport. Here's some things that are happening and things we should be aware of that maybe we could communicate with fans or your sponsors or stakeholders or other members of our ecosystem around this. And here's some ways that you could do that communication storytelling in a really credible and authentic way. That's a way it would intersect with that. If we look at training people in the commercial team, it might be, again, some of the same with the basics, but thinking, what are the ramifications if you bring in a commercial partner that goes against some of our environmental sustainability credentials? What could the fallout of reputational damage be because of that? What could the fallout of financial damage be if a sponsor then pulls back out, or if you're forced to part ways with a partner or sponsor because it doesn't stack up in terms of commitments you've made? So training is a crucial part and should happen for all parts of your sport organisation, no matter what role people are in already. In terms of that, going beyond just knowing the basis, if you do that, you probably still need to hire in external expertise, because whilst everyone's trained in how it intersects with their role, training current staff or hiring staff with some kind of sustainability background may not give you the level of technical expertise that you need to, for example, do a carbon footprint, do an environmental footprint, report annually, understand and dissect the information and data and make it usable and make it actionable. So in this case where you're training current staff, you probably are still looking to hire in external expertise. At least initially, it may be that that evolves over time. Option 3, ideally you have both. Yes, absolutely. I want an embarrassment of riches when it comes to looking at these objectives. The benefit of hiring someone in who the buck stops with them, who understands the content and the information, has a great idea of what our strategy should be, how it's going to work for the sport organisation, what the milestone should be, what the deliverables should be, when reporting needs to happen, how they're going to be a spokesperson externally, how they're going to engender this change internally. All of that, you have someone where the responsibility is with them to do all of these things that are incredibly important. But everyone should also understand how they affect change within their role too. And that has absolutely no drawbacks in terms of either training your staff or bringing in perhaps a marketing manager or facility managers that can show that they also have a background in sustainability or that's an area of passion or expertise of theirs. If we just take a step back and look at the landscape in terms of recruitment and who you're bringing into these roles, and at the time of recording, this is February 2024, I think the bigger challenge for sport right now, even where sporting organisations have made commitments to the environment or to climate change or to emissions reduction, is actually getting C-suite buy-in to engender larger transformations beyond perhaps reductions in operations. So where we need to see a sea change is a transformation in sport business and how it operates in all the different ways that that manifests, not just in incrementally reducing our impact on the environment. And in terms of that challenge, I actually think getting the right people in place to overcome those challenges, to me, is a bigger challenge. And people may disagree with that. I really welcome your thoughts. For those people who are in post around that, having the soft skills to be able to keep this on the agenda, drive this change at the C-suite and have that buy-in at scale to enable bigger transformational change is really, really important. And if you can find the people to help either internally or externally with that, that I think is maybe where we can start supersizing our efforts. So something to think about there. I'm going to stop there and we're going to pass over to Matt Campelli, who's going to give us our expert insight. Matt, a lot of you will know, is the director of Touchline Earth and also the founder of Sustainability Huddle, long-time advocate and instigator of change in the sector. So let's pass over to Matt and hear what he's got to say about this.
This week, we've had a very, very hot debate happening within the Sustainability Huddle community talking about this exact topic. There have been a couple of points of view, some really interesting points of view. One member of the community put forward the argument that a perfect scenario will be like an internal person with sport-specific training, but with their kind of own sustainability lens, managing someone else who's got kind of external sustainability expertise. They did say, however, that this would only work if the organization is willing to implement the experts' recommendations. So it's about collaboration, working together, looking at things through sport, also sustainability lens, but also having a buy-in from leadership to actually implement what they're suggesting. A few others had kind of a similar point of view. Some said that a sustainability expert without prior knowledge of the sports industry could actually look at things from a new perspective and potentially identify risks and opportunities that those kind of in the weeds of sport might not necessarily spot straight away. And then earlier this week, or actually it was last week, there was a really fascinating LinkedIn post that caught my attention attention. There's a guy called Robin Parmelon. He's the founder of Play for Planet, and he's put up lots of interesting posts in recent weeks. And he had a post that was demonstrating the keywords that he could find within job advertisements for sport and sustainability roles. And within the 14 keywords that he identified, there were a number of technical aspects. So there were things like Excel spreadsheet competence, reporting, carbon footprint, all of that stuff came up. But there were also lots of skills that were kind of interdisciplinary. So things like communication, for example, project management, data analysis, advocacy, public speaking. These are things that anybody can kind of be trained to do. So kind of looking at it from a kind of more generalist approach, which I thought was really, really quite interesting. Really good post, so check it out if you can. But I guess my own personal view is that in an ideal world, people working in sustainability roles will have all this good technical knowledge around applied sustainability, but also have a bit of an understanding around the nuances of sport. Sport is a very kind of specific industry. Could probably be quite a frustrating industry at some points for people working in sustainability. So having an understanding and an expectation that things may be a bit tricky from the outset is probably a good thing to have. But I believe in the same way that people can be trained to be sports marketing specialists, they should also be able to be trained as sport sustainability specialists. And I think now we're seeing more and more courses developing around that, which I think is great. So we'll see more of these people who have got a knowledge of sport, also knowledge of sustainability, which I think is fantastic for the industry. But a final thought for myself, I think in an ideal world, the sustainability team in a sports organization will not just be one person. It will be a wide team of specialists and generalists who kind of come together to set a course for the organization in a very strategic manner, working together, blending all of their own skills and expertise. In there, you'd have technical knowledge, but you'd also have very strong communication and public speaking skills. People who can kind of engage within the organization to get people on side. All of these soft skills combined with hard skills is going to be really, really crucial, I think. And the leader of that team would need to have a director position.
Brilliant to hear from Matt. Always such a pleasure to get his insights. So thank you, Matt, for that. And also, he mentioned the Sustainability Huddle there. If you're not already signed up to the Sustainability Huddle, it's free. There's loads of great conversations going on there. Incredible new community portal. So check that out if you haven't already. I totally agree with Matt. The nirvana on this is a bigger team of both specialists and generalists that blend skill sets. A lovely way of putting that, Matt. Blending those skill sets of hard and soft skills and having that team of generalists and specialists is absolutely the dream. I think he's uncovered there. That's something hopefully in the not too distant future we'll be seeing at scale across sport organisations. But I guess to get there, we need to continue the drumbeat to ensure resources are allocated to bring these teams in to really engender that change at scale. So Jamie, thank you for the question. I hope that helps. I would love to hear from other people on this. What's your organisation doing? Where do you sit within this in terms of being a specialist or a generalist? And how have you maybe gone from being a consultant to sitting in-house or vice versa? How are you in-house liaising with external experts? How are you bringing together this sort of expertise that helps drive your sport organisation forward? And I guess I just finished this conversation that there's no right or wrong way to do this. What we're talking about is different ways that it could manifest. Every single sport organisation is going to have a different set of needs, a different set of resources, a different set of buy-in from its board and its C-suite. Every single individual sport organisation is going to be looking at this through a different lens. This is just, I guess, about starting to share some insights from me and from Matt in this case, and I'm sure a lot of you will have more to say on this as well on social media and maybe in the Sustainability Huddle. So great to think about that. We're going to go on to the second question now, which I wanted to include in the same episode because it's not dissimilar in the side of being around roles in sport and sustainability, but from an earlier stage perspective. So Robin on email came to us with a question. And you heard him mentioned there by Matt. He obviously put this question over on the Sustainability Huddle or started having a conversation about it over there as well. Lovely that he's come to us at the Climate of Sport Ask Me Anything pod to cover it up as well, and really happy to share insights on his question. So Nyla, pass over to you and let us know what Robin's question was.
Robin would like to know, how can a motivated and passionate person get started in this sector? Robin states this question was particularly important for graduates who may feel that they lack experience in the field and face imposter syndrome.
Okay, so how can motivated and passionate people get started in this sector, especially graduates who may feel they lack experience or face imposter syndrome? So first of all, I think if you're a graduate, there's no need to to experience imposter syndrome, first of all, because you very happily are likely at the very, very beginning of your career. I feel like imposter syndrome happens later on, where you feel like you've been doing something for a while and you're given opportunities and you think, should I be here? Which a lot of people experience. And again, I think it's something that comes up a lot. And I was actually speaking to a colleague about that this week, where she asked me for some advice around some opportunities that have come up. And my advice to her, as I will share with you here, is if people are asking for your viewpoints on something, it's because they want to know and they think you're credible to share your views. So you should never feel like an imposter in that situation, no matter what stage you're at with your career. If someone wants to know what you think and you have an opinion on it, share that opinion and don't feel as though you're an imposter on it. So there's a bit more therapy for us to think about in terms of that. This is a great question. And I think it's really interesting to me because I get inundated, as I'm sure a lot of people who are working in sport and sustainability and have been for a long time. I personally get inundated with requests to speak to undergraduates and graduates about this work, how they can get a job in this space. And actually, just before Christmas 2023, I tried to pull together sort of an open space alongside some colleagues to have a Q&A session on that. And the timing didn't work out. So maybe I'll try and organise that again, because it does feel like something that a lot of undergrads and grads have in terms of how they're going to get started in a career in sport and sustainability when they're incredibly passionate about it. And I think the main thing is for us as people who are further along, that we open arms and welcome all of these passionate young people who are graduating and want to make a change within this sector in. And there's a lot of different ways I think that people can get started. So first of all, I'm just going to go through some of my thoughts, and then I'm going to pass over to another person who's been on this journey for a while and has got some great thoughts to share as well. So my first point on this is thinking about your value. So all of us as human beings have strengths and weaknesses. We have our own value. We bring our own set of skills to the table, no matter what stage you're at in your career. So even if you are early on in your career, maybe you've just graduated and you're looking to get started, you'll have started to unpick what you're really good at, what you can do that others can't really do as well. What is your superpower? And even during university, maybe in some group projects or different ways you've intersected around maybe a dissertation or a master's, you'll have started to realise, what do you bring to the table? Are you more extrovert or introvert? Are you good at bringing people together? Are you good at breaking down really complex topics into more simple and accessible terms? And there's loads of different things that already you can start to reflect yourself on and articulate what your value is and what you bring to the table. And I encourage you to do that. It's something I didn't do till later on in my career, and I wish I'd done it sooner, because what we all have as human beings is this USP. Every single person has got a different set of skills of how they can help drive progress as you're relating it to your career. Think about your value, think about what your superpower is, and that should form the basis of how you get started in this sector. Because once you can understand and actualize and share what your powers are, then you can start thinking about, how can I apply these powers to a role within sport or a role within sustainability? Let's be realistic. There are a growing number of roles within sport organisation for sustainability, but we're still not at scale. And as we covered off in the first question, there's still a lot of discussion around what's the best way to go about this. Efforts have been going on in this space for decades. It feels like it's a 30-year overnight success. And in the past 12 months, we've really started to see this explode. We've started to see more sustainability roles in sport. People will say to me, yes, Claire, hello, I've been a head of sustainability at a sport organisation for 15 years. We don't disagree with that, but broadly, globally, at scale, it hasn't been at that level, and we are starting to see movement in that area. So whilst there is a number of roles that already exist, it still isn't at every sport organisation globally. It's not like marketing, it's not like sales, we're not at that scale yet. But if you're entrepreneurial and maybe you want to create something that you see isn't currently being serviced, then great. That's wonderful. If you see that opportunity and you can see a way that you can bring something that other people aren't doing to the table, then that's an incredible way to get started and take action. But also, don't feel like you have to do that just because there's no roles that fit your current expertise and you're so hell-bent that you do stuff that maybe isn't needed or isn't your skill set or your superpower just to do something. Because obviously you want to be personally very happy and you want to be professionally very additive. So that leads me into the next point of, if a role doesn't currently exist within sport and sustainability, but it's an area you want to get in, you want to get into, think about whether you want to get into sustainability or sport. If you absolutely had to, what would you choose? A role within a sport organisation, come what may, or a sustainability role, come what may? Even if it was in sustainability, but it wasn't in sport right now, would you go for that? Or the answer to that question is no, I am working for a sporting organisation and I'll start in another role if I have to. That I think is really helpful when chatting about where people's priorities lie, because even if the roles don't exist right now, you could go down the avenue of doing sustainability for a different industry and then in the not too distant future transfer those skills into sport as we see more sustainability in sport roles come together, and vice versa. If you are hell-bent on working on sport because it's all you've ever dreamed of doing, maybe initially you go into a graduate placement, or maybe you go into a marketing role or a communications role or a facilities role or a partnership role, whatever it is, start there. Once you get inside the organisation, you've got your primary job. But within that, as soon as you step foot in that organisation, you're saying, who's responsible for sustainability? How can I help? Can I bring together a monthly working group? Can I support you and assist you in the work that you're doing? And I'll take that on. So again, I think it is great if you can get a sport and sustainability role that's already in place and that fits your expertise. But please don't be put off if you haven't. Think about where your passion lies and think about not just what I can do now, but where do I want to be in 5 years and what path can I put together to get there and where does that start? Because that can help you think, I haven't got the dream role just now, but in 5 years, I'll have built up on this journey, all of this expertise, this knowledge, this experience, I'll have engaged, and then I'll have got to where I want to be. I'm 40 years old. I've only been in this for 10 years. So I didn't find what I was looking to do until I was in my late 20s, early 30s. So people who are coming at this and find their passion from the offset and get a role when they're still in their mid 20s, I think are unbelievable that you've got that direction and that single-minded thought already so early on. I wish I'd have had that. Although actually I'm also of the mindset that whatever your journey is, you'll get there and you'll learn a lot along the way that you can bring to that role. So I wouldn't change anything, but incredible if you are single-mindedly laser focused on this in your early 20s. Know that you don't have to get exactly where you want to be in the next 6 months. Maybe you've got a slightly longer term plan. My third point is, even if you don't go into a role that in a sport organisation that doesn't have sustainability in the job title, that you can still affect change. And that's what I was talking about in my last point. If you're hell-bent, sport is your thing, sport's your dream, you're going into a role and it isn't currently a sustainability role, you can still affect change. We need sustainability pioneers in all the different sectors and departments of sport organisation. And as we spoke about earlier on in the pod, a lot of people are currently in post and are getting trained up in sustainability. If you've got a sustainability background in education and you go into a marketing role or a comms role or a commercial role, at some point in the not too distant future, that will be very quickly uncovered as a massive asset to the organisation. So don't be put off if you're going in intersecting initially. Know that you can still affect change no matter what role you're going in under. I'll follow up again on the imposter syndrome because I think that's a really interesting one. I know people who've been in this sector for decades, and when they're asked to speak or do interviews or answer certain questions, they still say, I don't think I'm the right person. I invite people to speak at our annual summit and I'd say, you're incredible. This work you're doing is so cool. You should come and speak about it. And they say, no, I don't think we're quite there yet. We don't want to hold ourselves up as a leader. We want to be very careful. We don't, we want to listen. We want to learn. We don't want to be outspoken. And I think that's a double-edged sword in terms of that. Part of that might be imposter syndrome or positioning. But a lot of people who are very, very experienced experience imposter syndrome. It's part of the human condition. As much as possible, try and push that down. As long as you are being humble and credible and you are working conscientiously and thoughtfully, there's no reason for you to feel at any stage that you're an imposter in terms of what you're doing. We need all people to come together and help drive this work forward. So try as far as possible not to take that on board. Building a network is a really, really important part of this, and something I didn't come to till a little bit later in my career, of how important strong relationships in a network are. In fact, as you get older, you realise really that's all there is. When you're trying to do this work, when you're trying to make things happen, it has to be in congress and in partnership with other organisations and other individuals. And if you can establish relationships over a long term and trust and credibility with people, a lot of this is going to be much easier. In our space, people are really open to connecting and chatting and sharing. So start speaking to people, start asking them if they can spare a little bit of time in terms of hearing from them, asking them some questions, saying, is there anyone else you think I should speak to or connect with? Ideally, when you're asking people for something, I come from a background of generous leadership where you try and give something before you ask for something. That's not always possible. But again, depending on your background and expertise, maybe you've got something to bring into that conversation of, I'd love to chat to you about, a path forward for my career. And I'd love to share a little bit about my master's and dissertation. I think there's some really interesting statistics in that you might be interested in as well. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to do anything massive, but just if you can be incredibly helpful in terms of people giving their time to a lot of people who are asking for this time and these discussions to try and help bring something as well. And a lot of young people who I speak to know a lot of stuff that I don't know. And it's incredible to hear about it from different viewpoints. So think about that when you're trying to build a network and spend some time on that. The last point that I came at, when I started over 10 years ago, like 10, 11 years ago in this space, as far as possible, if you are starting into a new sector and do your research as well. Sometimes people come to me and they say, I'm thinking about doing this and I can't see anyone else who's doing it, when a quite simple Google search would uncover probably a number of people who are doing great things in that area. So as well, in terms of these conversations, try and do a bit of background reading and about what people have done before you arrange these chats. Is just really helpful, I think. And again, that's just not my reflection, but also people I've spoken to as well in this space. So in terms of how you can get started in the sector, I hope they were some helpful tips to get you going. I'm going to pass now to Marisa Schlenker, who is Program Manager for Yunus Sports Hub and a Sport for Development consultant, who's just going to share some of her insights of her journey in this and what she found helpful along the way. So Marisa, over to you.
Any kind of tips and tricks and guidance. I can obviously speak from my own experiences and how I gathered and accumulated different work experience so that I felt more prepared to work in sustainability. For me, sustainability concept, I understood it more around social. So how can projects be designed with the community involved for a specific community and also leading to outcomes which benefit a community. And so it was really more human-centered approaches and projects around that. And I then also started to expand and, of course, think about sustainability in a broader context. And that came from taking different courses, being a researcher. So I'm finishing my master's in sport policy. And there you have a lot about sport management and then policies around sustainability, for example, which look at environmental impact and also just the intersection between environment and social causes. So a lot of the environmental justice work. So I would say expanding on the notion and concept of sustainability, then I realized I needed to learn a lot more. It's a constant feeling in mind. So I took a lot of different courses, certificates. Also, I think my learning really took place during COVID when there were a lot of webinars, events, workshops led by different people, different experts like Claire, for example, who wanted to create more awareness around sport and what sport can do in terms of its impact on the environment and how the environment, the natural environment, is affecting sports. So there's a ton of knowledge out there. I don't think there's kind of any gaps in knowledge. It's more about figuring out the best way for you to learn. What are the best learning methods for you? Whether it's a course, whether it's taking on a volunteer role, which also is more of an experiential learning. So learning by doing, or of course, learning in a paid job is also very helpful. But I kind of took approach and I got a lot of experience in different things, being part of networks, communities. There's more and more of this available. So you can ask questions, you can discuss. Nobody knows everything, and really putting your questions out there and trying to understand sustainability from all angles. I think there's a lot of available networks and communities now to discuss and so on. So if you want to go more of the academic route and really understand sustainability and that's your environmental sciences and so on, I would recommend that. If you're looking to gain more hands-on experience, looking for volunteer petitions, webinars, this type of learning and development, but really create a plan for yourselves. Think about your own professional learning development, your goals, and how to take those forward by what's available. There's a lot out there. Of course, some will require an investment, and financial resources. Some it's about networking and attending different events and speaking with people, reading a lot, and so on. So I hope this advice helps someone out there. Looking forward to connecting with others and looking forward to continuing to learn. And I think we all know the climate crisis and the time we're in. We've all got to expand our notions of sustainability, and it's about continuing to push and challenge and to learn and do better.
Such great insights from Marisa, and she is an absolutely incredible force on the football and development side. Such a wonderful human being. So thanks, Marisa, for sharing your insights on that. And I think that would be incredibly helpful as well for people. So we've heard from some awesome people in the space. I've given you some food for thought, hopefully. So Jamie and Robin, thank you for your questions this week. I'm super excited to cover off more questions again in our next episode. The last thing I finish on really with this idea of training and jobs and recruitment and roles within sport and sustainability, I think we can all agree that this area is exploding. It is becoming much more mainstream. It's becoming much more usual to have individuals and teams of individuals who are leading on this work, which is incredible to see for those who've been working in the space for a long time and have tried to initiate these changes. So what it means is as that resource grows, it's because more sport organisations are making commitments, more of them are taking action, and they're resourcing in order to change and transform and progress this area of work. So it's only a positive sign as this continues to grow. So keep pushing forward, keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for listening. Please share this episode with anyone you think it would be helpful for, either on the recruitment and training side or on getting started in sport and sustainability. I hope it's helpful for people. As always, follow us, review the pod if you get a second to, share your thoughts on social in terms of what you're doing. And we love to hear everyone else's thoughts on this as well. So till next time, I'm Claire Poole, and this has been the Climate of Sport Ask Me Anything, episode 4. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Climate of Sport Ask Me Anything. Don't forget, you could submit your question, any question at all about sport and sustainability through our email address, which is hello@climateofsport.com. You can also submit your question through our website, www.sportpositive.org/podcast, or DM us on our social media pages, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter or X. If you don't wish us to read out your name, please just write the word anonymous at the top of your message. If you enjoyed this week's episode and you'd like to get it every week, click follow on the podcast to get it directly into your playlist. And please do share, give a review, and comment on the social media coverage of this episode. It helps us share the message further. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.